Beneath the quiet canopy of ancient trees, where the wind whispered through leaves like the murmurs of forgotten sages, Ling Han stood before Old Man Su, his gaze steady yet contemplative. The lake behind them shimmered faintly, reflecting a sky that seemed vast enough to swallow all ambition and all doubt. Senior, Ling Han began slowly, his voice measured as though weighing every word against the scales of reason. There are preconditions when speaking of how many stars one can surpass. He paused, gathering his thoughts, then continued with calm clarity. Take myself as an example. Suppose I encounter someone whose power exceeds mine by 9 stars. Let us call them Person A. Now, if Person A has never cultivated techniques to defend against attacks of divine sense, then if I employ the 7 kill subduing soul technique to suppress their spirit and weaken their combat ability, my chances of defeating them would be no less than 50%. His eyes gleamed faintly, like a blade catching the moonlight. In such a case, I would be capable of surpassing 9 stars. He shifted slightly, his tone turning more analytical. Yet, if I were to meet another opponent, Person B, whose strength is only 8 stars above mine, and if this Person B has trained in methods that resist divine sense attacks, then even with a smaller gap in power, I would still likely lose. A faint smile touched his lips, though it carried no joy. In that case, I wouldn't even be able to surpass 8 stars. He lifted his gaze as if tracing an invisible pattern in the air. And yet, if Person B lacks resistance to divine sense attacks, then they would naturally be unable to defeat Person A. This creates a strange cycle, one where I can defeat Person A can defeat Person B, and Person B can defeat me. Ling Han exhaled softly, the complexity of it all lingering in his tone. So in truth, I find it difficult to properly define my own battle prowess. For a heartbeat, silence hung between them. Then, Old Man Shu burst into hearty laughter, his voice echoing through the forest like rolling thunder. Good, very good indeed, he exclaimed, his eyes shining with approval. To think you have already begun to ponder such complexities. He clasped his hands behind his back, pacing slowly like a sage unraveling the mysteries of heaven and earth. Just as the shattering void tier is judged by power, so too are the immortal levels built upon that same foundation. Power is the root of all. He stopped, turning to face Ling Han with a gaze both sharp and profound. When we speak of star-surpassing geniuses, we do not measure battle prowess, we measure power. His voice lowered slightly, becoming heavier with meaning. Of course, possessing greater power does not guarantee victory. That is nothing unusual. But when discussing such geniuses, we evaluate their potential through the lens of power alone. He raised a finger, as though pointing toward an unseen truth, because in the end, power is the most fundamental attribute. A faint wind stirred, rustling the leaves as if in agreement. Without power, Old Man Shu concluded, everything else is meaningless. Ling Han nodded silently. He understood. Even if 2 cultivators possessed equal strength, the difference in their secret techniques could create a vast gulf between them. This had nothing to do with talent or effort. It was a matter of what paths they had chosen, what arts they had mastered. By this measure, Ling Han realized he stood at the level of a 5-star genius, yet deep within him, he could feel it. His power was still growing, still pushing beyond the boundaries of his current cultivation. Perhaps he had already touched upon 6 stars. Old Man Shu seemed to read his thoughts. When you stood at the shattering void tier, the old man said slowly, you achieved a power of 20 stars. Ling Han's eyes flickered. That level of strength can only be reached through perfection. Without attaining absolute completeness in that tier, it would have been impossible. The old man's tone became more solemn. But now, even if you cultivate to the peak of the consummate level of the mountain river tier, your power will only be able to surpass 6 stars at most. 6 stars, Ling Han fell into silence. To ordinary cultivators, even reaching 5 stars was the stuff of legends, something whispered in awe and disbelief. Many so-called legends might not have even reached that height through their own abilities, relying instead on secret arts. Yet now, 6 stars was being spoken of as a limit. Old Man Shu shook his head, a faint smile tinged with distant memory. Young lad, the universe is far vaster than you can imagine. In the immortal realm, prodigies are not rare. His eyes grew distant as though gazing into the past. When I was young, I traveled far and wide. I witnessed countless geniuses, and only then did I realize how narrow my own view had been. Ling Han bowed his head slightly, his voice respectful. Senior, please enlighten me. A pleased expression appeared on Old Man Su's face. This young man was neither arrogant nor impatient, qualities rarer than any secret technique. After a long pause, the old man finally spoke, his words dropping like a thunderbolt. The true limit of cultivation is 10 stars. Pu Ling Han nearly choked. 10 stars? 5 stars were already considered myth, and yet now 10 stars? Moreover, this was not the result of external techniques or tricks, but pure power alone. Was such a thing even possible? If you wish to challenge those of a higher major tier, Old Man Shu continued calmly, then you must become a 10-star genius. His gaze turned sharp like a blade unsheathed. This is a realm that even 9-star geniuses can only look up to. Even if one reaches the peak, consummate level of the Mountain River tier as a 9-star genius, they must still bow their head before someone at the early stage of the Sun Moon tier. Ling Han's heart surged with heat. To cross a major realm and defeat an opponent such a feat had never been heard of. And yet, now, a path had been revealed. Of course, it came with strict conditions. One had to stand at the absolute peak of the Mountain River tier, while the opponent must be at the lowest stage of the Sun Moon tier. Otherwise, even 10 stars would not be enough. Ling Han frowned slightly. But senior, he said, you mentioned that I have already reached perfection in each cultivation level. Even so, I can only attain 6 stars of power. His voice carried a hint of confusion. Then, is this not impossible? Old Man Shu laughed once more, waving a hand dismissively. Patience, young lad. He rose to his feet. Come, walk with me. Together they stepped deeper into the forest by the lake, the world around them growing quieter, as though even nature wished to listen. After a while, Old Man Shu spoke again. The so-called consummate level of the Mountain River tier is not truly consummate. Ling Han froze. Not consummate? The old man stopped, his voice dropping into something grave and ancient. The true pinnacle of the Mountain River tier lies in 5 mountains and rivers, not 4. The words struck like lightning. Ling Han's mouth fell open. For generations, it had been accepted truth. 4 minor tiers, 4 mountains and rivers. After that, one would begin forming their sun and moon, stepping into the next realm. And yet now, 5? Was it possible to go further? 6? 7? Old Man Shu shook his head firmly. 5 is the true limit. Beyond that, no more can be formed. He continued, his tone steady. This is equivalent to advancing 1 additional minor tier, and it is the only path to becoming a 10-star genius. Ling Han fell silent once more, his thoughts churning. But then, he asked slowly, what about those between 6 stars and 10 stars? Where were the 7, 8, and 9-star geniuses? Old Man Shu laughed. Do you think that forming 5 mountains and rivers guarantees perfection? He shook his head. Some can only form the mountain, but not the river. Others form both, yet fail to cultivate them to their peak. His eyes gleamed knowingly. These are the ones who become 7, 8, or 9-star geniuses. Understanding dawned upon Ling Han. So that was the truth. After a moment, he asked again, curiosity burning brighter than ever. Then, senior, in the sun-moon tier, can one form 5 suns and moons? In the heavenly body tier, 5 heavenly bodies? He hesitated slightly before continuing. Would that not lead to 11 or even 12-star geniuses? Old Man Su chuckled. A sharp question. Then, raising a single finger, he said, but you misunderstand one thing. To maintain a power of 10 stars, one must reach the true pinnacle at every single cultivation level. His voice grew firm. If you fail to achieve perfection in even 1 level, your power will fall. You will become a 9-star or 8-star or even 7-star genius. Ling Han nodded slowly. So even reaching 10 stars once was not enough. It had to be sustained across every realm. How difficult, how terrifying. After a long pause, he finally asked, Senior, have you ever seen a 10-star genius? At this question, a fierce glint flashed across Old Man Shu's eyes. His expression trembled slightly, as though recalling something that stirred both awe and fear. Only after a long while did he answer, I have never seen one with my own eyes. His voice softened. But I have heard of them. He looked into the distance, as though gazing beyond the mortal world. Those who are truly invincible within their own realm are known as young king-tier cultivators. Ling Han's heart pounded. Not just one, but several such beings existed? How could that be? To reach 20 stars in the shattering void tier already required the blessing of heaven and earth itself. Without it, one could only reach 17. The final 3 stars were on an entirely different plane. Old Man Shu noticed his confusion and smiled faintly. Do you truly think, he said gently, that it is difficult for great elites of the immortal realm to send their descendants into small worlds, to open the sky? The forest fell silent once more, and in that silence, the vastness of the universe seemed to stretch endlessly before Ling Han's eyes. Beneath the vast and silent dome of the cosmos, where countless stars drift like ancient lanterns in an endless sea of darkness, a single revelation struck Ling Han like thunder splitting the heavens. Ah! His body trembled violently as if struck by an invisible bolt of insight. The truth he had just heard shook the very foundation of his understanding. To reopen the heavens, to step once more into the immortal realm, and in doing so, seize the final 3 stars of power, reaching the absolute, flawless pinnacle of humanity. Such a path existed. Ling Han let out a slow breath, his gaze turning distant, filled with a mixture of awe and helpless amusement. These prodigies, these monstrous talents, they truly had powerful backers, fathers who could alter fate itself. Without such support, one was already lagging behind before even taking the first step. Old Man Shu's voice carried the weight of countless years as it echoed once more, calm yet sharp like a blade hidden in silk. I tell you this not to tempt you into reckless advancement, the old man said, his eyes half-lidded, yet piercing. If you wish to stand among king-tier cultivators, then every realm you step through must be perfected, flawless, without blemish. His tone grew heavier. Otherwise, even if you stand on the same cultivation level as others, their foundation will surpass yours. Their power will crush yours. And beyond that, how will you compete in god tools, in rare treasures, against descendants of Eternal River tier or even Genesis tier elites? Each word landed like a hammer strike upon Ling Han's heart. He nodded slowly, his expression solemn. This was reality, cold, undeniable. In terms of resources, he could not compare. The only path left to him was to temper himself to refine each realm until it shone with absolute perfection. There was no other way. Thank you for your guidance, Senior, Ling Han said sincerely, bowing deeply. Within his heart, he understood clearly. Had he not heard these words today, he would have advanced the moment he reached the consummate level. And at that point, no matter how far he climbed afterward, his ceiling would already have been sealed. 6 stars. Perhaps 9 at most, but 10 stars? Impossible. Old Man Shu gave a faint nod, as if the matter was already concluded. Farewell. With that single word, he closed the door to further conversation, returning once more to his quiet indifference, like an ancient tree that had seen too many seasons. Ling Han did not linger. I will come to visit again. With another respectful bow, he turned and departed. Though only a few secrets had been revealed, their value was immeasurable. Between 6 stars and 10 stars lay a chasm as vast as heaven and earth. Yet for most prodigies, such knowledge changed nothing. To reach perfection in every realm was easier said than done. Even those who could form 5 mountains and rivers, 5 suns and moons, if they failed to perfect the foundation of humanity itself, they would never touch the threshold of 10 stars. Perfection was absolute. Even the slightest flaw would reduce one to 9. Ling Han's thoughts drifted to those around him. The Rain Emperor, perhaps he could reach 9 stars. Feng Po Yun, slightly inferior, perhaps 8. As for Murong Qing, Ling Han shook his head faintly. That man had only achieved 17 stars at the Shattering Void tier. His potential was likely limited, 4 stars at best, perhaps even less. The truth was harsh. The gap between geniuses had not narrowed upon entering the immortal realm, it had only widened. 3 days passed like fleeting clouds. At last, the moment arrived. Ling Han and Shu Yanyu stepped onto the starship, standing upon its deck as it prepared to depart into the boundless void. The vessel beneath their feet was colossal, so vast that it resembled a floating city rather than a mere mode of transport. Warships could be compact, like the cloud-piercing shuttle, built for speed and precision, carrying only 1 or 2 people. But starships, they were monsters, each one at least half the size of a city, their hulls engraved with immense formations, complex arrays capable of shielding against meteoroids, void storms, and unseen dangers lurking in the cosmic abyss. When fully activated, these formations could even withstand the assault of heavenly body tier elites. for a time, enough time to escape. Yet even with such enormity, the starship was packed to the brim with cultivators, each drawn by the same irresistible call: opportunity, destiny, or perhaps death. Without warning, the starship roared to life, lifting into the void as it broke free from planetary gravity, soaring into the galaxy like a streak of light. Time passed. Days slipped by. Yet not all starships were equal. The merchant vessel Ling Han traveled upon was merely average in speed. While another ship had already made a round trip within 5 days, theirs still drifted through the endless dark, not yet reaching its destination. 5 days. 6. 7. Finally, on the seventh day, they arrived. Before them, space was crowded beyond imagination. Starships filled the void, anchored like countless floating islands, all facing a single awe-inspiring sight. Ling Han and Shui Yanyu stepped onto the deck, gazing forward. The starship's formations activated, generating a faint gravitational field to stabilize their footing. Though there was no air, it mattered little. Those who had stepped into the immortal realm no longer depended on breath to survive. Below that threshold, however, coming here would be suicide. And then they saw it. A massive hemisphere floated in the void. At first glance, it resembled a star. Yet something was wrong. Stars were perfect spheres. But this looked like a star that had been cleaved in half, as if an ancient blade had severed it cleanly, leaving behind only a broken shell. A tomb. That was the only word that could describe it. Before its immense presence, even the city-sized starship seemed like nothing more than a grain of dust, an ant before a mountain. It's not light, it's life essence. A cry rang out, filled with disbelief. In an instant, shock rippled through the entire crowd. Life essence, the very foundation of existence. It determined lifespan, how long one could walk the path of cultivation before reaching the end. And yet, it could not be stolen, could not be transferred. Even if one seized another's life essence, it would only nourish cultivation, not extend life itself. When one's life essence ran dry, death was inevitable. That was the law of nature. And yet, before them, this vast tomb pulsed, breathing out endless streams of life essence, limitless, unceasing. How could anyone remain calm? If one could cultivate atop such a place, the benefits would be unimaginable. But this only deepened the mystery. A tomb should be a place of stillness, of death. Why, then, did it radiate such overwhelming vitality? Heh. A tomb appearing in the galaxy in the first place, does that make any sense? Indeed, it was a tomb, and atop it stood a tombstone, massive beyond belief, a single slab of stone towering higher than any mountain they had ever seen, no seams, no cuts, as if it had been born whole from the heavens themselves. And upon it, 2 words, blurred, indistinct, unreadable, yet undeniably present. Who could build such a thing? Was this once a planet, forcibly refined into a burial ground? The thought alone was terrifying. Wait, why? Can't I remember them? A voice suddenly trembled with fear. I saw the words just now, but I can't recall them. I can't remember either. A chill swept through the gathered cultivators. The moment they turned away, the memory vanished, as if some unseen force erased the knowledge itself. This was no ordinary tomb. Excitement surged. If even the tombstone held such mystery, what of the treasures within? The tomb stood silent and majestic, life essence flowing like an invisible tide. At its front, a single entrance revealed itself, shrouded in a swirling fog of chaos, as though heaven and earth themselves had yet to fully form. No one could see through it. No one could comprehend it. No wonder even the Empress, even the majestic Heaven sect, had been stirred into action. This was no ordinary opportunity. This was a miracle. Some could not resist. They attempted to ascend the tomb from other directions, but the result, instant death. Their bodies exploded into fragments the moment they drew too close. A heavenly body tier elite stepped forward, activating a powerful treasure to shield himself as he approached. For a brief moment, it seemed he might succeed. Then, boom, the treasure shattered into dust. Half his body was blown apart. Only by sheer luck did he survive. Silence fell. If even heavenly body tier elites could not force entry, who could? Perhaps only Venerable Trinity himself, but he had never left the majestic Heavens sect, and even the main entrance was no safer. The fog of chaos pressed down like the weight of a star. The moment one stepped within its influence, bones would creak, muscles would tremble. A few steps further, and one would be crushed flat. What could they do? Everyone understood. This tomb held unimaginable fortune. Perhaps it belonged to an eternal river tier elite, or even a Genesis tier existence. If one could obtain even a fragment of such a legacy, the thought alone made hearts burn with greed, yet none could enter. What use was treasure beyond reach? That fog of chaos, it's dissipating. An aged voice spoke. All eyes turned. It was a heavenly body tier elite from domineering sun planet, a being who had lived over 30 million years. His life was nearing its end. He had come here with no intention of returning. Either he would find a path to break into the eternal river tier, or he would die here. And as his words fell, the fog shifted slowly, gradually. The chaos began to thin. The gate was about to open.